Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome into the program. Today on the show, we have a handful of stories. Don't worry, it's not going to be too many, and we are going to have a fun little podcast here with you. So everyone, before we get started, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, everything you need to know about the show, what we do, and how we do it. While you're there, check out social media links. We have a couple of articles that we just published. The latest one was a nice little picture guide for Apple and in their Apple Spring event, what happened there, everything they showed off. We highly recommend you check that out. You can, of course, also check out Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We have links posted there as well. Now, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get started with computer and technology news brought to you by Computer America. All right, everyone. So I think that for our first story, we're going to start with this one. A lot of legislation, and don't worry, I saved you guys from a lot of it, but not all of it. This one, HBO hit with a class action lawsuit for allegedly sharing subscriber data with Facebook. And, you know, class action, you know what that means, right? That means that you may stand to gain pennies on the dollar for what the settlement will actually be. This is more for the lawyers, but for those who don't know, this has to do with the Video Privacy Protection Act. And yeah, other social media sites have, well, and obviously HBO is not a social media site, but places like TikTok have been accused of doing the same thing because, well, HBO class action lawsuit sharing data with Facebook. And I guess everyone's first reaction should be, well, duh, of course, right? Everyone shares their information with Facebook. That's what makes Facebook so powerful. Now, they say that they're facing a class action lawsuit because they gave subscribers viewing history to Facebook without proper permission. The suit accused HBO of providing Facebook with customer lists, allowing the social network to match viewing habits with their profiles. It further alleges that HBO knows Facebook can combine the data because HBO is a major Facebook advertiser, and Facebook can use that information to retarget ads to its subscribers. Since HBO never received proper customer consent to do this, it allegedly violated the 1988 Video Privacy Protection Act. There you go. HBO, like others, discloses to their users that it uses cookies to deliver personalized ads. But I guess one thing that is kind of, screwy here is that, like, obviously their license agreement says we use cookies to serve you better ads and serve you better content. But what it doesn't explicitly say is that we're going to gather your private information, that's a given, but we're also going to share it with third parties. That's the part that they never got consent for, and that's the part where this class action is likely to go somewhere. Other streaming services have been hit with similar claims. TikTok recently agreed to pay $92 million settlement in part for violating the Video Protection Act. In another case, however, a judge ruled in 2015 that Hulu didn't knowingly share data with Facebook that could establish an individual's viewing history. The law firm involved in the HBO lawsuit won a $50 million settlement with Hearst after alleging that it violated Michigan privacy laws by selling subscriber data. Essentially, it's it's this weird situation where they're allowed to collect your data. They're allowed to compile it. They can sell it to advertisers, whatever. But by sharing that data with Facebook, And then, of course, advertising through Facebook. Like HBO sharing their data with Facebook helps HBO get better search results and, gets more bang for their buck when it comes to advertising. So, like, in reality, this is HBO making a good business decision for HBO, but it's not a good decision for privacy matters and sharing personal information with third parties. So, a cookie cutter, what they say here is a standard privacy policy will not suffice. Essentially saying that, the cookie cutter boilerplate, we collect your data and we reserve the right to share it with whoever we want, doesn't go far enough to include the activity that was included here. So there you go. That was story number one. We'll keep up to date on that. We'll see when it actually goes to court and how much the settlement will actually be. But these class actions, if you recall, anyone from Apple to Microsoft to so on and so forth, they usually end up being like, if you're lucky, $5 to $10 in some kind of cash that you would have to work very hard to redeem. So we'll see. Okay, so that was story number one. Story number two, though. Let's go ahead and talk about Apple. So yesterday they had their Apple spring event. It was honestly a very good show. There were a lot of good updates, and they even unveiled what I didn't know at the time. They're actually discontinuing the iMac 27-inch, and they are replacing it with the standalone monitor and the standalone computer, the Mac Studio. Well, turns out that not everything they showed off there, because this is one product that they did not show off, but it will be included. I never thought I'd see the day. Check this out. Apple may actually have a value cable. They may actually sell you a cable that you can't buy anywhere else, and may actually be worth the money. So Apple is listing its new 3-meter Thunderbolt 4 Pro cable for $160, which some people, including the author, kind of argue that's far too much for a cable. But given the scarcity of other Thunderbolt 4 cable options, and it's over 2 meters, or it's 3 meters, so what is that, like a 10-foot cable, 11-foot cable, they're saying that it might be your only option. And that's the part, is that it may seem like a lot for a cable, $160 for a cable, oh my God, but it is a high-speed 40 gigabits per second Thunderbolt 4 compatible cable that can provide, I think it was like 95 watts of charging power. And, all that together, it's not like a basic HDMI, it's not like an Ethernet cable. This thing is very well engineered to very high specs. So, 160 is a lot. But when you compare it to things like, let's see, I think a 1.8 meter from Apple is 130, which is too much because other ones are selling the same thing for about $80 or so. The shorter ones, definitely not worth it. But no one sells a 10-foot cable with these, with these specs, and that's where Apple, for only $30 more for an even longer cable you can't get anywhere else, might actually be a good deal. So just a heads up, if you're a huge Apple fan or you are looking for a Thunderbolt 4 Pro cable that is over 12 feet long, Apple might be your only go-to. So there you go. Never thought I'd see the day when Apple might actually be worth the money. You can't go anywhere else. There you go. So, story number two, story number three. Let's go ahead, jump right into this. Okay, we're going to do one more story and then jump into like the real meat of what this podcast is going to be. And it has to do with, Russia, Ukraine, and the internet and what's going to happen and what is currently happening. There's a lot to, kind of go off of here. But, okay, let's do one more story and then we'll jump into that. And that has to do with Intel. And check this out. I'm actually all for this. As much as I hate on cryptocurrency and as much as I hate on NFTs and things like that, I think that there's a lot of my animosity, I'm sure a lot of animosity of others, has to do with this whole idea that, they don't they're doing this in like a roundabout way. They're taking GPUs, they're not very power efficient. They're having to start up other ways to generate electricity to farm cryptocurrency, which is almost like this seemingly useless coin that has such a huge detriment on consumer markets and the environment and all this kind of thing. It's like, man, I hate it. But check this out. Taking it a step further, Intel decided to, and it may be a little bit late to market, but it's still nice to see, where Intel will launch another mining chip. And Intel, the world's largest multinational technology company, announced it's launching another mining chip for cryptocurrency shortly after launching its first mining chip. The announcement was shared on Intel's official website, and yeah, check this out. They said that the announcement on their official website explained that the Agile X M Series FPGAS will be the first of its series, and they commented all Intel chips, this particular line of chips, including the members of the M series, include fast on-chip SRAM or SRAM in the form of MLab and M20K blocks. These SRAMs are integrated into the programmable logic fabric and therefore located immediately adjacent to logic that will exchange data with these memories. Some Intel Agile X M series chips also incorporate in-package HBM, blah blah blah, essentially saying that they're very compact. Everything is on this chip, and it's very, very fast at doing one thing, and that's mining crypto. And of course, well, not just one thing. They also said it's also good for machine learning, but I digress. They explained, they said that she also claims that these chips enabled customers to achieve higher performance with better power efficiency across all markets and all end markets and applications. Furthermore, the announcement came less than a month after the first announcement of the Bonanza Mine chips. Back then, the company talked about its wishes to be part of NFTs and crypto. Still, these things are supposed to be like hyper, they say they're 1,000 times faster than GPUs, like on like a dollar basis. So, yep, these things are like hyper specific for machine learning, cloud, edge applications, including crypto mining. If this can cut into the demand for crypto mining, all the more power to them, especially if they're super, super power efficient. And like, if this becomes like the only option because they're just so much better than graphics cards, heck yeah, this is perfect. Good job, Intel. Definitely want to see more of that. Now, let's go ahead and get into the main topic of, let's go ahead and get into the main topic of our podcast here today. And that has to do with the internet. And what some people, mainly the people over at BBC, are claiming is called the Splinternet. Now, for those who don't know, the internet is not always the internet. Obviously, what we associate with that would be the World Wide Web, and it's full of addresses that you find on Google, and so on and so forth. It's not just a service. There are places, there are networks that, inside every private business, there are networks inside every data center that are not accessible to the vast majority of us. And think about that on a larger scale. It's kind of like what you see in places like China, where they have their own networks that are only accessible from within the country. They have the Great Firewall, so you can't access content easily outside of the country, and it's tightly controlled inside the Great Firewall of China. Now, we bring this up because Russia back in 2016, and this is according to the article way down at the bottom, they said that way back in 2016, Fang Benjing, known as the founding father of China's Great Firewall, visited Russia, again in 2016, to assist them in what they're doing and make Russia's firewall much more similar to the Chinese one. Saying, and that really goes to show that Russia has been thinking about this for quite some time as kind of back-end to back-end internet provider, continues to cut itself from Russia. We look at what happened with, what was that communication one? It was, let's see, so obviously you have ICANN, which answered no to this, but let's see, there were other organizations that essentially provide the networking and the cabling for, connection between Russia and the United States and Europe and so on and so forth. They are cutting Russia off for their activities in Ukraine. And now some people are calling for Russia's complete unplugging from the global internet. Russia just today announced the possibility, not that they're going to do it, but just in case it happens, Russia wants the ability to switch everything completely over to their own internally hosted web services so essentially their internet continues to run, but it will only be accessible to Russian websites, Russian services, Russian banking, Russian, stuff. But at least the internet will not just become a figment of the past. It would just be a more tightly controlled, think like Chinese or North Korean style internet. Not everything available, but what is Russian controlled. That seems to be the goal for them. But, it's not just a goal, but it's also maybe it has to be that way if more and more companies kind of back out and stop serving Russian clients. So, let's see. So with that being said, so for many, the calls to cut off for the cutoff were a dangerous slippery slope towards what's known as the Splinternet, where different countries have different versions of the internet. So they also mentioned Iran. Net content is policed. External information is limited by state-owned telecommunication company of Iran. Russia itself has been experimenting with a sovereign internet, dubbed the RUNET, for several years, albeit one that has been retrofitted to the existing internet rather than China's built from the ground up version. In 2019, the Russian government said it had successfully tested the system. At the time, few understood the need for it, but now, in the context of Ukraine, it all makes a lot more sense. There you go. In that test, Russian ISPs were asked to effectively configure the internet within their borders as if it were a giant intranet, the private network of websites that don't speak to the outside world. Now it appears Russia is retesting those systems, and again, the call went out that all Russian companies have to be ready for this by the 11th. So in 48 hours, all companies that want to keep using the quote-unquote internet, they have to be ready to switch over in just a matter of hours. I'm sure that there are IT professionals inside Russia that are freaking the heck out, let me tell you. Now, they said that they see more of it as another test of preparedness. This was more about Russia calling on ISPs to get ready to make local copies of DNS and the phone book of the internet, and to have local versions of third-party software that comes from servers outside Russia. But the author of The Great Firewall of China thinks the plug could be pulled at any time, saying cutting off the internet, making sure Russians are only consuming the content that the Kremlin approves of, that kind of thing makes sense strategically, so you can see the path we're headed down. Now, if we step back, what I want to talk about just for a second was the fact that Russia has been exploring this. Clearly, they are hours away from being able to honestly effectively implement a move like this. If they weren't prepared, if they weren't considering it, they wouldn't be prepared to do it so quickly. So what does this mean? This means that Russia will likely pull more from China's internet. There will be less communication between Russia and the rest of the world, less IT consulting, less back and forth, less freedom of information going into Russia, and less free information coming out of Russia as well. That's going to be much more tightly controlled without public internet. And really, holistically, it's going to mean the internet in Russia and in China. This really accelerates something that was already happening, and a lot of people had theorized was going to happen, where there were going to be two internets. And there was one that was going to be by the West. It was going to be by the United States, Europe, South America, so on and so forth. The internet that we all know and love. And then there was going to be a second internet that was fully controlled You had to log in through a web portal. You have to put in your real identification. The government controls the information that's found on it. It would be like if Google was run by the federal government, kind of thing. It's fully and wholly controlled by the government. And that was the second internet that China had been pushing for quite a while. Not to say that the two weren't connected in some manner, but there are things inside China that you can only connect to inside China. And of course there are many sources outside of China that you cannot connect to from within China. So that was already happening, and it looks like that split is going to continue. Now, obviously, as an American and as freedom of speech, freedom of information, one would hope that our version of the internet, which has a lot less censorship — I don't want to hear any bull crap about being censored, whatever. But yeah, there's a lot less censors. If you want to find information, you can find information on our internet. Whereas if you go to China and you look for certain topics or certain things, you will find little to no information on those topics. And of course, not only that, but you will be alerted to law enforcement for searching for those, which could get you in trouble entirely. So this rift is only going to get worse now that you have a second major geopolitical entity join in on their network. So now it's not just China versus the West, it's now Russia and China versus the West when it comes to the control of information and the control of the internet. It's, by and large, it doesn't speed things up that much. This doesn't change things all that much, but it does provide further incentive for China to keep doing what it's doing, because now, hey, they have their little brother. They have their little Russian brother to, kind of watch out for them, or, to cater to. So there you go. I don't know what this all is really going to end with. I'm betting at least for, one of the sanctions, quote unquote, that could be done is cut Russia off completely from the internet, and Russia has to maintain their own internet for at least a couple of months, if not a couple of years, while the response to the invading of Ukraine plays out. So that's what it feels like to me, but I'm open to being wrong. Now, there we go. There was story number 4, story number 5, just 2 more stories left. Wrap these up real quick. Tinder, the one, it's a dating app, lets you date people. Check this out. They have a company called Garbo. Funny enough, they've partnered with the non-profit service Garbo to help determine if matches have a history of violence, which, some may consider that an invasion of privacy. I mean, you're trying to date this person, barely even know them, and they're already looking into your background and all that kind of thing. But let's face it, knowing that your potential match has, domestic violence charges, that's important information that if they don't share that upfront, you need to learn it one way or another. So Tinder is giving users in the U.S., at least, a way to conduct a background check on a potential match. Through the Safety Center, you can visit the website of Garbo, a non-profit background check platform. They typically only need a person's first name and phone number to surface information about them. And it may ask for other details, such as the person's age, if it can't find anything about them at first. The service will look for indicators of a history of violence. And again, this service is mainly looking for that history of violence. Like, that's really what matters. It's not about your credit score or, your past addresses or anything like that. It's about a criminal background. They said it has a database of more than 1 billion records of violent and harmful behavior. Man, y'all angry. Let me tell you, namely public records of arrest and convictions, as well as sex offender registry information. As part of its mission to create a more equitable background check platform, they exclude non-violent, non-harmful offenses such as drug possession, loitering, curfew violations, and minor driving tickets. So, There you go. If a background check suggests that the match has a history of violence, you'll be encouraged to report them to Tinder. Match Group doesn't allow anyone reported for violent crimes to use its dating service. So that's pretty nice. That's good to know. I did not know Tinder had that policy of if you have domestic violence on your record, you're not supposed to be using Tinder. Makes sense though. Tinder will be able to do 2 background searches for free, and then they will have to pay a service fee of about $2.50 per search. But to be fair, Tinder does not take a cut of that $2.50. That is strictly a processing fee that Garbo service charges. Because, you can go over to Garbo, the website itself, and pay the same amount for the same service. So the app's parent company Match Group invested in Garbo last March. It plans to integrate the platform into other dating apps to bolster user safety. But still, I thought that was pretty cool, being able to roll background checks directly into the service. And, well, if you do find something, you are, they're not supposed to be using the app anyway. So, the only time it really comes into play is when the other person is at fault to begin with. So, there you go. Now, the last story, and this one is actually pretty cool, for a service that I thought was pretty much dead. Looks like there could be some new life breathed into it. And this one with Google hints at Windows games running on Stadia. And that's really cool because Google, they have a platform, they can do cloud computing, they can do all this kind of thing pretty well. But their titles are crap. They don't have enough of them. Microsoft, on the other hand, they're also doing cloud computing, and I think it's going pretty well, but they also have the titles, so maybe a mixing of these two previously competitors might lead to an actual usable service. We'll have to see. Google is planning to detail its Windows emulator for Linux next week at the company's Google Games Developer Summit. Reddit users have spotted a session at the summit that will detail how to write a Windows emulator for Linux from scratch. The session will be led by Marcin Undak on Google's Stadia porting platform team. Promises a detailed overview of the technology behind Google's solution for running unmodified Windows games on Stadia. There you go. It appears that Google has built its own Windows emulator for Linux to help them do this. I would be surprised if Microsoft let them do this. But then again, in the spirit of open source, which Windows has embraced in the not too distant past, maybe they would, turn the other cheek to this. We'll see. If the emulator runs live on Stadia instead of just testing environments, this could open the door to a lot more games making their way onto Stadia in the future. When Google first unveiled it 3 years ago, the server hardware powering the service all ran on Linux. That meant that game developers had to port their games to Stadia. But obviously, if they get this working and they get it working well, that means that you don't have to port anymore. Everything is just available right there. It now seems that Google has built a solution to remove that work and allow Windows games to run unmodified. It's really cool. They said that Valve has also created its own Proton compatibility layer that allows Windows games to run on Linux by using a modified version of Wine. Proton now helps power the Steam Deck, although some games won't let you use that. But almost like the back end, there are developers and there's the business side, and they're like, we haven't made deals, we don't want the compatibility in that nature, blah, blah, blah. But then you have the tech side, which is, kind of heavily in the Linux favor, where they go, check it out, everyone, compatibility, we have everything running and it works great. Wonderful. That seems to be where we're at. The business side of it hasn't really come to terms with it, but the tech side of it is, to quote Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. So there you go. Now, Google might not be alone in bringing unmodified Windows games to gaming services. Amazon's Luna game streaming service is currently powered by Windows, but the company has been trying to hire developers with experience in working in Proton. Google's plans aren't super clear right now, but we'll learn more about what it's doing with Windows games on Stadia next week. We'll definitely see what happens. We'll probably cover that on our own, but yeah, that would be worth the watch. So March 15th, mark your calendars. Hey, we'll have fun with it. So everyone, with that being said, we hope you enjoyed today's show. We tried to keep it under 30. Didn't do too well, but it's okay. We had a lot of fun. We hope that you learned something. And as always, Russia, Ukraine, we hope you guys work out your differences and everyone stay safe. Thank you for tuning into the program. ComputerAmerica.com is where you'll find everything, including show notes, links to all these articles, and more. Until next time, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.